The gas-huffing murderer, Aleksandr Rubel.
His background is largely unknown for the murders. So a lot of speculation has to be done, and a lot of information, even basic information, like both of his parents' names, like you can find out the name of his father and a little bit about his father. Like it's evident from the facts of this case that his father was a violent man and probably not the greatest influence. However, you can't even find the profession, right? You can't find a lot of information here, but there's still a lot to say about this case, and that's primarily because this killer currently walking around in Estonia and has a family and has not reoffended since. So it is a relatively important case, and it's important, and I think it's important because it's important to get into the head of what causes a teenage boy to go off the rails exactly. Was it just substance abuse? Was it the world around him? Was he always like this? There's a lot to talk about. Born December 25th, 1980. Born inside of an undesignated area of Ukraine. Very little is actually known about his childhood or can be confirmed. However, there are some facts that we can use and some inferences that we can use to come to conclusions about what he went through. He was growing up in a period of economic uncertainty. He lived first in Ukraine, which his family would then move to Estonia, two different provinces of the Soviet Union. These provinces were at the time represented as Soviet republics. So actually, post-1990 and into the 1990s, during the collapse of the Soviet Union, when he was growing up, there was a period of lawlessness in the Soviet Union, or the USSR, however you'd like to identify it as. They basically had a period where organized crime was on the rise. The US had periods like this as well, but not to the same extent. Many of these factions would remain in power to this day, and so this brought a lot of uncertainty. So his childhood, from all accounts, was normal to people in that area of the world. However, when we consider his upbringing, we need to put into perspective the fact that his family situation, the government situation, were all intermingled in how he may have reacted to certain events or how he may have responded. Rupel would routinely sniff gasoline, and he would sniff in these fumes, and he would use that to get high. And so he started doing this at the age of 13. Now, people don't just start puffing gasoline if their life is great. So remember earlier how I said he came from Ukraine to Estonia. Even though they're all Soviets, or they're all supposed to be one big happy family, it doesn't always work out that way. When you're from a different province, you can experience certain bullying, or you can experience just the stress of being an immigrant or a foreigner in a foreign land. Even if you're all speaking the same language, it's very, very tough. So that probably could have played into it. His parents had a pretty dysfunctional marriage, so that also could come into play, and it does later in the case for sure. But growing up, he begins sniffing these fumes in, right? He begins inhaling fumes of gasoline, and he describes this as kind of the catalyst for his murders. He tries to later pin all of his anger, all of his frustration out on the gasoline. Now, Huffing in dead ancient dinosaurs as a way to get stone may sound very, well, stupid. Mostly because it is very, very stupid. It kills brain cells very quickly, but he was able to somehow keep his life together for the most part. But he began feeling these sort of murderous urges, and he would wait and he would fight it for a little while, but he finally gave in. So he gives in at around the age of 17, and he finally kills his neighbor. His neighbor's name is Tunu Pulg, and I apologize if I mispronounced this, but it's an Estonian name, and I'm not Estonian, and I found two different ways to pronounce it online. So if there's anybody who's more knowledgeable on that subject, please let me know. But yeah, basically, he kills his disabled neighbor, and this would be an example of a crime of opportunity, but also a crime of impulse. So he saw that his neighbor probably couldn't defend himself, but he wanted to kill somebody, and he had since he had started puffing this gasoline, according to him. Not that he's the most reliable narrator, because later in the story he will go on to tell plenty of lies, and a lot of what he says is total bullshit. So the method he uses can be noted as blunt force trauma. So basically what he did was he took a random object and he just bashed him until he died. And so there isn't a whole ton online regarding this, because this is 1997, after the fall of the Soviet Union, and so the records aren't great. And yeah, it's a very depersonalized, it's not a very personal style of killing somebody to use a blunt object. So it can be described as something he was not doing with exactly a level of care. It almost shows a complete lack of association with the victim and even with himself. I would say that the next murder is kind of how I would come to sort of the conclusion that his home life wasn't all that great and he didn't have a great role model. So his father's name is Andre. And basically, Andre has this problem. He's very, very angry at his wife because he doesn't believe his wife is being faithful. So Andre invites this man who he believes is having sex with his wife so that him and Alexander can kill him. And so his father has this man over to their house, and basically his father stabs him, and then Alexander strangles him, and this man is thrown out of the window. Now, it's not known whether it was Andre who threw him out of the window and ultimately killed him, but basically his father went to jail for this for the next 7 years. He was let go without any consequences. So his next murder takes place on a Strumi beach in Tallinn, Estonia, which is also the capital of Estonia. And so he uses a knife this time, and he brutally bludgeons the person to death. It's described as almost animalistic. So it's another case of like extreme overkill. And so it seems to me like when he does these things, they're in just fits of rage and of almost a compulsive nature. He had no connection to this victim. So this murder would also occur 2 months after his second murder. And so I guess there's a pattern there, but there's also a pattern in the brutality of his first and his third murder. This man was a total stranger. His name was Vladimir Ivanov. He was 43 years old when he got killed. The only thing that I think kind of separates this from the third murder and the first murder is the refusal. The reason he killed this man is supposedly because this man refused to give him money so that he could go and huff more gasoline. So, in my opinion, it's evident that he enjoys killing, but it's also evident that he has some sort of suppressed rage, if I had to guess. So his first 4 murders so far have all been men, but his next murder kind of shows an escalation. He ends up murdering a woman named Olga, and he breaks into her apartment and then he brutally stabs her to death. And he does this only 1 week after his 4th murder. So he's lost a lot of control at this point, and he's just becoming, it's becoming like an everyday thing for him almost. So 3 weeks later, he does the same thing and he murders somebody with a knife. And this man is named Vladimir, and he breaks into his home and he just does the same thing that he did to Olga. And so this indicates more of a pattern, but then it changes again. The last victim, Alice Stivas, she was a friend of his. He desired a romantic relationship with her. She was 15 at the time, and so he was 17, 2 years older. But she wasn't really interested in that, and so he got very angry and he started attacking her. And then he apparently said this to investigators later on, that he didn't intend to kill her, but he didn't want her to report things to the police. And so once he had started the attack, he felt like he had to finish it in order to stop her from reporting things to the police. And this case would ultimately be his downfall, or I don't really consider it a downfall for him. Due to regime change, he did not spend time in Gulag, we did not ship him to Siberia, and we did not send him to a uranium mine, because he only serves a few years in prison for these brutal murders that he commits. And I don't think, had he kept going, that he would have lasted too much longer in day-to-day life. I mean, with how addicted he was to gasoline and all of these other things and factors, I feel almost like they did him a favor locking him up. Another thing to note is that during these interviews, he wasn't always truthful. Like, he initially said that he killed a lot more people than 6 people. And the police were able to determine a lot of these things were lies. He also would never really take credit for these murders, or it may have been a way of coping with what he did. And he would always kind of blame the murders on the gasoline. So he was released in 2006 from prison, and he currently has a family, and he lives under various aliases. People have reported seeing him in either Ukraine or Estonia, and so today he hasn't reoffended. The officials at the time said that he was not ready for day-to-day life and that he would commit his crimes again, but it appears, at least for now, he hasn't reoffended. And given it's been 18 years, so overall, I don't know if anybody can ever really truly redeem themselves after doing that. And I don't believe he ever deserves to be free, but that's where our story ends.